sometimes I do think back and wonder how did I overcome that? Like, no one's telling me this is a good idea, and yet I still went out and did it. I knew that creatives did not want to deal with computer issues, especially in the early days of the computer, in the early days of the internet. And it was almost like a barometer of whether I would work with them or not. If I said my company name was Forget Computers, and they really liked that, they were probably a potential client. The concept was, if you're a creative and you want to focus on your creative business and the challenges of technology are a struggle, forget about it. We'll take care of it. Forget computers, get creative. Despite the fact that I tried to remain focused and I thought I was, I did over time lose that focus. And I share this story because if anyone out there thinks that if they have not articulated and shared with their team their core values, they need to do that. I think doing is the hard part, right? We all talk about things, we all think about things, we all dream about things, and actually doing them is both the fun and the hard part. Perfectionism will freeze you up and prevent you from doing things. This technology has not been around long enough for us to really master it. And it's happening so quickly. This idea that we should all just intuitively know how to deal with it is kind of absurd.
This is the Business Philosopher Within You podcast. I'm your host, Bhavesh Naik. An essential aspect of being a business philosopher is the value we place on the humanness of the people we work with. This idea takes us into the realm of creating a company culture that supports smart and sustainable growth. To explore this idea of smart business growth through company culture, I've invited a very special guest to join us. Ben Greiner is a seasoned business leader with over 25 years of experience in building and scaling companies in the IT industry. As a strategic advisor and speaker, Ben brings deep expertise in leveraging technology to drive business growth, enhance operational efficiency, and strengthen security and compliance frameworks. His hands-on experience as a business owner uniquely positions him to offer insights into the intersection of technology and business strategy. In 1998, Ben founded a 100% Apple-centric IT company that quickly grew to serve clients of all sizes. The company was acquired in 2020 by Antiva, a leading managed service provider where Ben remains an investor. He continues to influence Apple technology adoption and has been featured in top-tier industry events, including Apple at Work, Mac Admins, Command Control Power podcast, as well as speaking internationally at conferences such as CES and X World Australia. I am pleased to have you on this podcast, Ben.
Bhavesh, thank you very much. And if I could just have you introduce me everywhere I go, that would be awesome.
Thank you. I'll be happy to.
Thank you.
The first company you started, you called it, if I'm not mistaken, you called it Forget Computers.
Yes.
That's an intriguing name, and I'm kind of curious. What's the genesis of that name? How did you think of that name, and why did you call it Forget Computers? You're a computer guy.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I must admit I registered it under the name Digital Logic, and we had a slogan that was "Forget Computers, Get Creative," and I had a couple issues with Digital Logic. One, it was a little hard for me to say. I don't know. Digital Logic, you got to work a little hard to say it clearly, especially over the phone. And it was also, I didn't have the domain name. I had to use like a -LLC or something to get the domain name. And this is the early days of the internet. And this is when everyone's still learning about, 1998, how to even use the internet and what HTTP was and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I was working I was trained as a designer, had some marketing experience, was working in the advertising industry, and basically fell into the go-to guy for technical issues.
Correct.
So my goal was to focus on the creative community here in Chicago, and I knew that creatives did not want to deal with computer issues, especially in the early days of the computer, in the early days of the internet, and the early days of transitioning from the old school way of doing things to the new modern way of doing things. So eventually I said, you know what, let's just change the name. So it was within a year, I think, that I pivoted to changing the name to just Forget Computers, because people really connected with that. And it
Yeah.
was almost like a barometer of whether I would work with them or not. If I said my company name was Forget Computers and they really like that, they
Hmm.
were probably a potential client.
Yeah.
You said it yourself. You're like, you love the name. But I had
Right.
tons of business people in Chicago, because I was limited at the time to Chicago,
Yeah.
um, who did not understand that name even when I explained it to them. And I would always think, you and I are not a good fit. We will not work together.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. What I love about the name is that it's customer centric. So you're not talking about yourself. You're talking about the customer, who this is for. People who are creative and they want to forget about computers and they just want to be creative. So it's a tool, right? It's
Yeah, I
you
don't think I
forget the
explained
yeah,
that very well. I kind of skipped over that. But yes, you're
yeah,
exactly right. The concept was, if you're creative and you want to focus on your creative business and the challenges of technology are a struggle, forget about it. We'll take care of it. Forget computers, get
exactly.
creative. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's relevant, especially with Apple, because at least in the beginning, probably even today, the Apple's real market was creatives, people who
Yes.
were creating,
Yeah.
and they were the ones who used to gravitate towards Apple versus Windows and Microsoft. So wonderful. Go ahead.
Yeah,
You.
exactly. And that's why when I started the company, I didn't want to have any name that was, a link to Apple, because actually Apple was predicted to go out of business around that
Mm-hmm.
time. I mean, this was
Yeah.
Steve Jobs had just come back to save the company. Nobody knew if he could or would be
Right.
successful.
Yeah.
And my thought was, well, regardless of whether Apple becomes successful or not, the creatives are not going away and technology is not going away.
Sure.
So again, even though in my mind I knew I was Apple focused, it was really creative focused, as you said. And it just so happens
Right.
all of the creatives used and continue to use Apple
Sure.
Macs, Apple products.
Absolutely. And basically, I think you kind of alluded to this. Who was the who was the customer, the ideal customer for you with Forget Computers?
Yeah, at the time, the ideal customer were the creative departments or small ad agencies, photographers. We even had some architects um,
Hmm.
that did not know IT or did not have an IT department. And
Yeah.
the way I got started, and people often ask me how I got my first customers. And looking back on it, it sounds so simple. It's it's a little unreal, but there was a
Hmm.
magazine that had published a list of the top 20 design firms in Chicago,
Right.
a printed magazine. And I basically took that magazine and did a direct mail campaign to all 20 of those companies.
Hmm.
And within my first year, I think 10 to 15 of them were my customers.
Wow,
So
that is
it
phenomenal.
it it was a
Yeah.
very targeted campaign, speaking the language that
Yeah.
nobody else was speaking. I mean, all the tech companies, and even today, a lot of the tech companies
Right.
still talk tech, 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 and it
Right.
goes right through the ears of a creative person. So I was very focused and had a printed campaign. In fact, my printed campaign, I was going to mail 4 postcards, and I
Hmm.
never mailed the 4th one because I got busy and overwhelmed, and really couldn't take on more customers. And had I been savvy in 1998, of course I was still barely in my 20s, but had I been savvy enough, I would have you know grown even faster. But I didn't
Yeah.
have the skills or experience at that time to do that. And I wanted to deliver a good service. I didn't want to get ahead of myself and just say yes to everybody and then
Right.
not be able to deliver on that.
Yeah. Well, you did. I think from the sounds of it, it seems that you did so many things right, and especially the one that matters the most, which is branding, focusing on the computer. And then you also focused your expertise in one very small niche, very, you specialized in something. And
Yeah.
you spoke their language. And those were all the things that most people probably do wrong when they start a business.
Yeah.
And you got them right off the bat. So congratulations on that. And
Thank
in
you. Yeah.
business, the less number of mistakes we make, the better it is, right? Because we're gonna make mistakes. We're gonna make lots of mistakes. We're gonna
Oh,
make
yeah.
lots of mistakes,
Yeah.
right? So you talk, and I applaud you for not doing the tech jargon, and I can see that, I can hear that even as you speak. You have not yet used a single jargon or acronym so far in this conversation. But I want to point one thing out, and I think that the managed service providers is that's the category that the business was in, right? It's called MSPs.
Yeah.
Is that
Today,
correct?
that's what it's called. Yeah.
Today, that's what it's called, right? So did you grow into that managed service provider segment, or was it something that you already had figured out that that's what you were going to do?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I initially, my initial plan was that I would be a consultant to these creatives on their technology and actually help
Sure.
them with workflow.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the time you could essentially create a file on a computer that could never be printed. Like it
Sure.
wasn't technically possible, or it would crash the computer, or would crash the printer, or
Right.
the point being, I thought I would help with workflow.
Mm-hmm.
But when I got into these organizations, I realized I had to take a step back. They weren't ready to enhance their workflow. They needed
Mm-hmm.
some basics. So I started doing what later has been termed break fix, meaning you have something that's broken, you pay me, and I will come fix it. Of
Right.
course, related to technology, and not just the Apple platform, but the software.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, Quark Express was very big. Fonts were growing, typography, and then Adobe, of course,
Sure.
so helping with the whole ecosystem. Um, in 2004, I went from 1998 to 2004, basically doing
Mm-hmm.
this. And in 2004, I was approached by someone who said they were looking to purchase a company. I don't think we had a chance to talk about this, but I've gone through 2 mergers. So
Uh-huh. Wow.
my first
Okay.
merger was in 2005,
Uh-huh.
and my little team of we had 4 or 5 people, including myself,
Mm-hmm.
doing this hourly work. We were
Yeah.
acquired or merged, or whatever the term you want to use, with
Yeah.
a company in the suburbs. We were based downtown in Chicago. This company was in the
Sure.
suburbs. They were maybe, if I remember correctly, about 30 people. They were doing Mac and Windows.
Mm-hmm.
And they were considered huge to me. I was only a small team, and they had 30 people. So they're much more
Mm-hmm.
mature.
Yeah.
And I was hoping to really learn from that experience. And I didn't know exactly what I was doing in 2004 either. So what I learned from that was this concept of managed services.
Mm-hmm.
And the concept is, just to simplify it, is instead of billing for the hourly time you spend helping someone, you bill a retainer, a monthly fee,
Mm-hmm.
for the value that you're offering, and you make sure that things are taken care of,
Mm-hmm.
and you provide certain services like a support desk. And I learned all about that in 2005, very early days of the now, fairly well-known MSP, managed service provider concept.
Sure.
But the company quickly realized that the way to grow was to grow with Windows. They didn't
Mm-hmm.
see a strong growth opportunity on the Apple
Yeah.
platform,
Yeah.
and I didn't believe in that, and I didn't believe that I could help with the Windows platform. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't passionate about it. So I basically got out of that agreement and
Mm-hmm.
started over in
Oh, wow.
2006.
Uh-huh.
And it was rough
Mm-hmm.
because I wasn't planning on starting over.
Yeah.
I wasn't legally allowed to just go back to the way things were.
Right.
There were some customers that agreed, we all mutually agreed would come with me for one reason or
Mm-hmm.
another. And there were actually 2 employees that came with me. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't remember how we worked all that out, but there
It
was
seems like a
some
lot.
penalties I had to pay to get out of that relationship and
Uh-huh.
start over. And I
Yeah.
decided I would become the best MSP. Again, I never use that term with my customers. That's just
Right. Yeah.
industry term,
Yeah.
but I would become the best MSP for Apple devices.
Right.
And they're really none of the solutions or software out there to help MSPs. None of it
Mm-hmm.
was focused on Apple. So I kind of had to do ad hoc things to build a solution. But that was really the start of the managed service industry that I'm still in today, even though I did eventually sell my business in 2020.
One of the things that I kind of like to get into a little bit is the why, and a lot of people, probably about 90% of the population, are happy just getting a job and moving up the corporate ladder, right?
Yeah.
So, and there's nothing wrong with that, and a lot of us make wonderful careers doing that. But you weren't one of them, and I'm always curious, what was it that inspired you to start a business in the first place? Was it
Yeah.
something that you were not happy with in your current role, or you saw some inefficiencies somewhere, or you saw a need for something, so there was a problem that you were trying to fix, or something else?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'll probably throw out a handful of cliches, and this is one of
Yeah.
them. Ignorance is bliss. Sometimes I look back and I
That's a good
think,
one.
yeah, I just didn't know any better, and why not start a business? And in
Yeah.
fact, when I told people what my business was, because I was doing my due diligence and research, I didn't just
Right.
wake up one day and say I'm starting a business. Um, I would say very few people, other than my wife, probably very few people supported me. Either
Mhm.
I didn't do a good job of articulating it, or they didn't think it was a good idea, or they were concerned for me because they thought Ben doesn't know what he's doing. You know? Uh, so I think it was all well intended, but there
Right.
wasn't a lot of support. So sometimes I do think back and wonder how did I overcome that? Like,
Yeah.
no one's telling me this is a good idea, and yet I still went out and did it.
Hmm.
And part of it was I was a creative, and I knew how to talk to creatives,
Yeah.
and I also knew enough or was interested enough in technology to kind of bridge that gap between
Hmm.
tech. So I was considered a technology expert in the world of creatives. You
Yeah.
set
Yeah.
me next to a true tech geek. I'm not quite at their level, but
Yeah.
I could make the transition. And
Sure.
I actually was getting frustrated with my world of creatives because I was creating content for clients, and they were deciding whether it was good enough, and I might decide that it was good, but they might disagree. And it was a very gray area. So some part of me does enjoy the black and white aspect of, is your technology working? Yes or no?
Hmm.
And there are very few things we can argue about when it comes to, is your technology working? I mean, there might be some
Yeah.
instances where I say, well, I think that's as good as it gets. And you may say, I'd like it to be better. Okay. But
Right.
the point is that aspect I was drawn to, and it felt like a natural fit for me to just help people with their technology. And I think that's why a lot of people do get into technology, even if they don't know how to
Yeah.
articulate it, is they do
Right.
want to help people, and it's
Sure.
satisfying to help
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. And that's not a small thing. Technology, we often forget that technology is not there for the technology's sake. It's
Right.
there to fix somebody's problem, to human problems. It's always, even AI, all the stuff that we have today in terms of technology, every single technology is here to serve humanity in some way, shape, or form. And sometimes we lose sight of that. So
Yeah.
I think that's a great insight that you shared. That I think even people who are passionate about computers and technology, they're actually passionate about helping people using those tools and technologies, right? So,
Yeah, and
yeah,
I'm still passionate about using technology effectively and
sure,
using it to benefit me,
right,
as opposed to controlling me, which,
yeah,
in 1998, technology did not necessarily control us. We were all learning how to use the latest and greatest. But
yeah,
I would say today, it clearly has overwhelmed a lot of
yeah,
people.
right.
And I often think back, we're going a little off topic, but very quickly,
That's
brief
okay.
story.
Yeah, right.
I think back to the early days of my childhood, my schooling, even starting in business in the 1990s. If you wanted information, you had to really go out and search for it. Go
Yeah.
to a library.
Right.
It took a lot of effort to get information. You had to either talk to somebody who was an expert or
Right.
find a book on the topic. And today, information is so prevalent that I find myself defending myself against the
Mm-hmm.
onslaught of information.
Yeah.
What do I want to let through? What do I want to spend my
Exactly.
time on? How can
Right.
I go on a information diet and stop
Mm-hmm.
trying? Because if you
Yeah.
like learning, it's so easy to learn
Yeah.
today, but
Yeah.
it's also dangerous because there's so much out there.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
So that's a challenge.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. More than ever, I think we are more responsible for kind of focusing on what we want to learn, and because we otherwise the information and the technology and everything that's coming at us is just going to inundate, and we can drown in that. So specialization, it's very curious that it's becoming more important now than ever before.
Yeah.
Then you kind of become an expert in something, and you drill deeper and deeper and deeper, and then you go wider within that niche.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned focus, and that's something that I always try to stay focused on, what I'm doing. And for a long time, it was serving the needs of creative professionals in
Yeah,
in a technology role.
sure.
And I must admit, despite the fact that I tried to remain focused, and I thought I did over time lose that focus.
Sure.
Not necessarily because I left Apple. I remained 100% Apple focused, but Apple grew beyond the creative market. And so
Mm-hmm.
I was getting inquiries and picking up customers that
Yeah.
were no longer creatives.
Right.
And that's not necessarily bad, but what I later looked back on, it kind of diluted the way I presented myself and my messaging. Like,
Mm-hmm.
despite the fact that I was successful picking up non-creative companies, only talking to creatives, I
Mm-hmm.
somehow thought that I needed to start talking to everybody. And
Right.
soon I was talking to nobody. If,
Uh-huh.
which is you hear that all the time in marketing, but you also hear it so many times people don't follow that advice. Like,
Yeah.
talk to a specific market and don't try to talk to everybody.
Yeah.
And even in my small business, I found myself straying from that
Mm-hmm.
focus
Yeah.
that I had from the very beginning.
Yeah. 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 And you had the awareness of that. So now I'm assuming that you brought that
Well,
focus back.
eventually,
Yeah.
yeah, eventually I
Yeah.
had the awareness,
Yeah.
but it was
Sure.
harder to get back to even when I
Yeah.
had the awareness, it felt
Right.
scary to go back to that focus, which is kind of counterintuitive.
One of the things that we talk about a little bit, especially, and I love to talk about this with people who build companies like you, is this idea of a vision. And the popular press and the management press and success press, they talk about all these things. And the reason why I like talking to someone like you who has been there, done it, is that your experience is basically, you've done it. So you talk from that. It's not a philosophical thing that you just kind of espousing. You're talking from the experience. And this idea of a vision, people talk about this a lot, right? Meaning that it's some idea of when you start a new venture, you have an idea of what it would be like. Let's say a year down the road, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, however far you can look into the future. Some people start with that vision, and some people don't. So, they just kind of they grow into it, they come into it by accident or something like that, and things kind of fall in place. What did you have a vision when you started Forget Computers of what it would be like, and even subconsciously, like daydreaming type of thing that it'll be this kind of company, or it'll be I'll exit and sell it, or anything like that, or something else.
Yeah, I must admit that in the beginning, I think other than an intuitive nature to just build a company that anyone could rely on and trust
Yeah.
and be a partner, that was my vision. I wanted to do good work with
Yeah.
good people,
Right.
serve great customers.
Right.
It wasn't really until I think it was 2000, maybe as late as 2017, where I participated in a program called the Goldman Sachs
Mm-hmm.
10,000 Small Business Program.
Mm-hmm.
And this took place in Chicago, and they have
Yeah.
others around the
Right.
country. And I don't know if they're still active or not. I don't know. Maybe they got their 10,000 under educated and they moved
Right.
on. But I still that program is alive. I know from a alumni perspective. I
Right.
still maintain contact with my cohorts. And essentially, why I bring that up is this was a very pivotal program for me.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and there's another story I won't go into about how I got into the program, but the point being the program, what I learned, and keep in mind, this is a cohort of maybe 20 other small businesses that
Right.
they fit the category of a small business. And, at the time, and maybe some people think this, I was unaware, but I think, oh, these are my problems and only I'm having these problems and struggles and challenges.
Yeah.
And then you quickly learn that we're all having the same problems and challenges and
Right.
struggles, and we can all learn from each other and help
Yeah.
each other. And, I was like, oh, I'm not successful enough because I'm not, as you said, the press or
Mm-hmm.
whatever you're reading and hearing, you're comparing yourself to successful businesses, and you're like,
Right.
well, I'm not
Yeah.
successful. And then you learn, and I just verified this the other day. The majority, at least in the U.S., the majority of small businesses never make $1 million in revenue.
Mm-hmm. That's
I,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, I think it was literally 91% of small
Wow.
businesses do not break the $1 million revenue barrier. And so when I started this program, I still had not
Mm-hmm.
broke $1 million. And I did feel kind of stuck.
Yeah.
And so in this program, and oh my God, I was going to make a point tying back to what you were asking me about. Could you
The
remind me
vision.
again?
That's
The
okay.
vision.
Yeah.
Yes, the vision.
Yeah.
So thank you. In this program,
Mm-hmm.
they really made us think about the vision. They made us think about our culture.
Right.
They made us articulate things that, we were all doing,
Mm-hmm.
but we had never put into words or put down in paper.
Sure.
And there were a lot of great things from that program. And eventually I did, I attribute it to that program. I got over the $1 million revenue
Yeah.
bump and was
Mm-hmm.
striving for 2 million when I got approached to get acquired again. And this was in
Mm-hmm.
2019.
Right.
And the things had changed, but and we can talk more about that acquisition. But I
Mm-hmm.
do think the interesting part is the part about culture, and
Mm-hmm.
we had talked pre-show about culture.
Sure.
And coincidentally, I just had lunch with a former employee who reached out to me and said, "Hey, I'd love to connect with you." And going one step back from that, the day before he reached out to me, my wife and I were talking, and I think I was reminiscing about running the
Uh-huh.
company, and there are always some employees that you struggle to make a connection with, and
Mm-hmm.
I had plenty of great teammates. Some of them were with me for nearly 20 years,
Right.
so I had a great team, and they were almost like family. So I was thinking back, and my wife said, I'm sure a lot of your employees, they might reminisce about this just like you are. I'm like, no, that it was just a job for them. They don't. That's not the case. And then, sure enough, this employee reaches out and says, "Hey, I really enjoyed my time at Forget Computers. I would love to connect with you." And he mentioned to me during lunch just the other day how
Mm-hmm.
he still references the core value
Wow.
sheet that we had
Mm-hmm.
built as part of this exercise.
Yeah.
Now, I must admit, when we spent time on this exercise, and this is like a 1 week exercise, like they tell
Yeah.
us about it, we do
Yeah.
our homework, we come back a week later, and we share, what we had come up with, and they really wanted us to fine tune it, and I struggled with it and thought it felt like a waste of time. I'll
Mm-hmm.
be honest with you.
Yeah.
I'm not
Right.
sure
Yeah.
this is. So it really was validating to hear, and I
Yeah.
share this story because if anyone out there thinks that if they have not articulated and shared with their team their
Yeah.
core values,
Yeah.
they need to do that because this still sticks with this this
Yeah.
person, and it
Yeah.
reminded me of it. And in fact, I pulled it up, and I'm going to share it on LinkedIn probably later this week.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And
that's my story.
and if love it, thank you. That what a testimonial that is from someone who was
Yeah,
an employee of the company who still remembers the time that they were at, and they want to know more about how did you do this kind of thing. So it's a terrific testimonial. I think, and if you're okay with it, we'll make it a part of our show notes so that
oh
people
yeah,
who are
yeah,
listening to this, they can follow through and follow up on that and read and learn more about that. I'm a double E, an electrical engineer, and I got doing what I do by accident. So I used
mm,
to, when I was in going to college, NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, I used to, they used to, I don't know if in your college, if you did this or not, but they used to require us to take humanities classes. I don't know if you remember that. Throughout, from start to all the way through the senior year. And the humanities classes were philosophy and political science and, religions of the world and things like that. And everywhere all techies, they don't want to take these classes. It's like it's a requirement, so we had to take it, but they hated it. I was one of the
yeah,
few ones who actually enjoy taking those. I love technology, but I also love the humanities aspect of it.
yeah,
And I'll tell you, I think and AI was there even in those days.
mm,
But there's some of the things that we talked about, in the beginning of the conversation, which was that the technology is supposed to serve humanities, and that's the reason
right,
why it was part of the curriculum, so that we have this understanding that this is not the technology is not being developed in vacuum. It's there for someone, right, or to solve somebody's problem. So I would say that having spent a number of years, over decades, doing what I do, and talking to folks like you. I am coming to the conclusion, I think I did that probably about 10 years ago, that the techies, and I'm a techie, so I can say that, right?
mm, yeah,
Technology folks, they think that technology is the hard stuff, the hard science, the coding and, putting the cables together and all that stuff. But everything else is to them, it's like foo-foo, what is this nonsense, right? Values and vision and all that. To me, I think that's the foundation. I think it's exactly the opposite. You have to build the foundation, which is the core values and vision and culture and things like that. And even as a human being, right? The hard
right.
skills are at the top of the pyramid. The bottom is actually all of these other things that makes us human being. Anyway, so you got me off on my favorite
Well,
topic there
no,
a little
that I
bit,
mean
but
that ties in exactly with the challenges that we face or
yeah,
serving our clients. And remember,
right,
we're a technology company, but I would often say, and it became one of our core values, we must communicate clearly. I'm struggling
100%.
even to say it, and the techies, and I'm not unique in that aspect. I would get frustrated by clients who would not communicate with us
Right.
and would not
Yeah,
communicate clearly. Why am I struggling to communicate right now?
that's okay.
So
And that's so part of being human is we're fallible, right?
yeah, that's
So
right.
yeah,
So we decided to flip that around, or through this exercise, I decided this is really what I'm trying to do.
hmm,
I needed to tell my team that yes, you will be frustrated by our client communication, or rather
hmm,
how they communicate with us. But that doesn't mean that we can give up or that we can badmouth that behavior. In fact, we
right,
need to show how it can be done better. We need to be the ones that get better at communication. We need to be
sure.
the ones that proactively reach out. And so, in summary, I came to the conclusion that there are very few technical issues. They are all communication issues. And
100%. I love that. Yeah,
yeah, if you're rolling out a
yeah,
project that involves technology, chances are it's not the technology that will
hmm,
fail you.
yeah,
It is the lack of communication around the expectations of that
yes,
technology and how to adopt and educate people around that technology that will make that project fail.
sure, sure. And something that I want to kind of get back to is something that we were talking about before we started this episode, that's the recording, was this idea of the definition of a growth. And you seem to have a different definition of what it means to grow as a business than what people put out there. No, could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I know we did talk about this, and I don't know if I can articulate it as well as I would like, but I do often find and get frustrated by the culture that the U.S. especially has built around grow, grow, grow.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that you must always be growing. I mean,
Yeah.
what is the saying? If you're not growing, you're dying, or something like
Right.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I I think sometimes the definition of growth, especially for small businesses, is too limiting, meaning it's
Mm-hmm.
just the revenue.
Yeah.
I said it earlier about the $1 million barrier.
Right.
That's a goal that just arbitrarily, really, that we've
Mm-hmm.
set kind of for ourselves.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always have to be about revenue. It could be about personal growth. It could be
100%.
about
Yes.
team growth. It
Yeah.
could be about growing profits, or the latest and greatest is growing EBITDA, which we won't go into. Look it
Right.
up. But there are lots of ways to grow, and I kind of think about it as intelligence. I in the black and white world, you're either really smart and intelligent or you're not. But
Yeah.
in reality, we have business intelligence and emotional intelligence and
Mm-hmm.
communication intelligence. You could go on. And some people are very good at a certain type and not so good at others. And I think it's the same way with growth. There are many ways to grow, but we just only talk about revenue.
Right.
And I don't think that's always healthy.
Yeah.
And one quick story, I just went to a alumni event
Mm-hmm.
where there were other 10,000 small business alumni members.
Right.
And as the name implies, well, maybe the name doesn't imply it, but the concept behind the 10,000 small business program is to help you grow.
Yeah.
And of course, they covered culture and they covered values and vision and all the all encompassing view
Mm-hmm.
of a company. But
Right.
at the end of the day, how they really measured that was how have you either hired people or grown
Mm-hmm.
revenue.
Right.
And part of that is to build a growth program. And so I was talking with an alumni member, and he has a landscape business where he does projects to improve your landscaping at a home
Mm-hmm.
or business or wherever it may be. And of course, his growth plan was to offer maintenance. So to
Yeah.
go from implementing design and implementation to then maintaining.
Right.
And everyone loved it. They said, this is a great growth opportunity. You should definitely do this. And it makes sense,
Yeah.
except for the fact that he's doing it and he's struggling and he's
Uh-huh.
not enjoying it. And
Right.
when I told him, well, why are you growing? You don't need to grow. He said, I've never heard anyone say that to me. And I feel like that's what I need to do. He's like, I just need to stop trying to grow and
Mm-hmm.
just kind of fix my current situation. And it sounds very basic, doesn't it? Like, just
It does. Yeah.
stop trying to grow. But
Yeah.
he's been told by so many people that he has to grow, that he feels this pressure. And you
Yeah.
know what? Maybe now's not the right time. Maybe
Yeah.
now he's not ready for it.
Yeah.
There are lots of reasons. And so I think growing for growth's sake is definitely not the best way to do it. But unfortunately, I have run into that many, many
Yeah.
times where I see that.
Sure. I love that story because one of the things, it's kind of emblematic of this idea where, we have lost, sometimes I observe that we have lost our center. So it's
Mm,
going back a bit of a plug for the podcast is the business philosopher within the business philosopher. The definition of that is basically three things. The philosopher is someone who does his own thinking or her own thinking, right? Which seems like such a small thing, but it ties right into your story that we are letting other people do our thinking. So
yeah.
the whole world is saying you grow, grow, grow. Just revenues,
Mm-hmm.
revenues, revenues. Number of people, how big is the company, how fast you're growing, all these things. And it, you know, my thinking is that that's not growth to me, which is what you're saying. The growth, smart growth. The whole idea is that you're doing your own thinking, and for you, that growth is not the right growth. I'm growing, but in my own way, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Yeah.
Just to kind of finish off the thought, you do your own thinking, and then you think about human condition. That's a philosopher, and then a business philosopher brings all of these things together in the cold and hard realities of the marketplace, so that they actually bring solutions to the marketplace that
Right.
that can survive and thrive within that marketplace. So switching gears a little bit, if you were going back to this idea of culture, were there any things that you did, such as, for example, systems, processes that you put in place, or any values that you kind of implemented within, or engendered, or tried to implement, or any strategies, innovations, ideas? What are some of the things that you ended up doing to inculcate into the culture of your team either this idea of the smart growth, or any other values that you hold dear as an entrepreneur, as a founder?
Yeah. And again, until I did that exercise with the small business program, it was
Yeah.
really difficult for me to even realize that I had built a culture,
Yeah.
and that I was building a culture.
Right.
And what I learned from the cohorts is that if you're not intentional about building that culture, then your team will build it for you. And
Yeah.
and sometimes that can be fantastic and work out great,
Could
but
be.
other
Yeah.
times it can go terribly wrong,
I love that.
especially if you have
Yeah.
someone who maybe doesn't fit with your values, but they have
Yeah.
an outspoken voice.
Right.
Um, so what I did find is once I was able to articulate that, it was easier for me because I personally I struggled and still struggle with um, there's the concept of leadership and there's the concept of management.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I can check all the boxes for leadership, but I struggle to check all the boxes for management. I don't personally like I'm not the best manager. I'm
Yeah.
more of a here's the assignment, go
Right.
do it, and if you succeed, great, and if you don't, I'll try to guide you, but
Yeah.
I could be a much better manager, or I
Sure.
should hire better managers than me.
Right.
Um, so the point of this is to say that there was a time where once I could articulate the values, it was easy when someone wasn't living those values to say, here are the company values and here's
Mm-hmm.
where, you fell short. And that for me was easier than just telling someone why I didn't like the way they did something. Two ways to do that is one, once you can articulate your values, is to share them with the team and to
Yeah.
make sure that we're all holding ourselves accountable to living to those values. And
Sure.
it's not just me telling the team, it's the team
Yeah.
telling me. I mean, one of
Yes.
the things that I did not like and I was also guilty of is when you're frustrated with a customer,
Mm-hmm.
you hang up the phone and then you complain to somebody about what just happened.
Mm-hmm.
And we all decided that was a bad behavior and a bad habit to fall into,
Yeah.
because if you start talking bad about a customer, thinking that they're not aware,
Mm-hmm.
well, one day that may slip out either
Yeah.
over the phone or an email or just in your tone or just in the way
Right.
you present yourself.
Yeah.
So we worked really hard, I think, as a team to hold each other accountable for not doing that. And it's a constant
Yeah.
struggle, so to speak, especially
Sure.
I think in the IT world where, you want to make sure you're not talking down to someone just because they
Right.
don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you're doing that, if you're helping someone repeatedly with something, it can sometimes grow tiring. You're like, oh my God.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, the flip side of that is sometimes we have clients, in my opinion, treat us with disrespect.
Mm-hmm.
And again, going back to what you said, smart business and smart growth, why as a business owner should I tolerate a customer, treating myself or especially my team members
Right.
poorly?
Yeah.
So I like to think I did a good job when we did run into issues like that, picking up the
Yeah.
phone and having that conversation with a
With the client.
customer.
Yeah.
And it happened more than once. And once
Yeah.
I remember even ending the relationship with the customer.
Mm-hmm.
And once I remember a customer actually came back to me and apologized and told
Yeah.
me what they were going through at home and
Right.
asked for forgiveness and another chance.
Yeah.
And that was a real, eye opener for me.
Right.
Not to say that everyone, not to say there are valid reasons for talking, bad or treating someone poorly, but you don't know what's going on in people's lives
Yeah.
when you're,
Yeah.
talking with them or trying to help them.
Yeah.
So again, going back to open communication, um, and so I think I got better at that. Obviously,
Right.
there are years where I probably was terrible at it, and maybe I got by just intuitively and because we were a small team, but I couldn't always articulate that. Other than I would always try to do what was right for my team and for my
Yeah.
customers, and as long as we were in alignment, everything was great. And if we weren't, something needed to change. Whether
Yeah.
it's we needed to let someone go or we needed to let a client go.
Sure. Sure. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So the exit. So how did that come about? Was it something that you initiated, or it just kind of came out of nowhere?
Yeah, well, again, what I learned from the 10,000 Small Business Program is that you need to start thinking about your exit.
Mm-hmm.
Even if
Right.
you don't have a desire to exit, you
Yeah.
need to think about it and
Yeah.
prepare for it. And that was another exercise that we had done. And what the way it came about this time was another alumni from that program who
Sure.
was in a similar business but Windows focused had
Mm-hmm.
gotten acquired.
Yeah.
And he reached out to me and said, we're talking about in this new organization, we're talking about getting ready for this growth in Apple
Yeah.
and building an Apple team or
Right.
acquiring a team. And I thought of you. And I was very reluctant because I had already gone through what I would call a failed merger in 2005.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the cultural differences there that we
Sure.
ran into and the
Yeah.
challenges. And I didn't want to make the same mistake, but it was also a different time.
Mm-hmm.
We were we had much more revenue and profit and employees and I had experience and I was finding it, at least in my niche,
Mm-hmm.
right or wrong, my perception was that I was finding it more challenging because these Windows teams were encroaching on my business. They were saying, well,
Right.
we've got an Apple guy, we can help you.
Huh.
And so as I was trying to get more business, I would come up against the competition, which really did not have in my view, the expertise that my team had, but they
Mm-hmm.
were presenting themselves as having it. And I had tried for many years prior to be a resource for these other Windows teams, and in some
Right.
cases was successful with some internal teams. We had also worked with a few MSPs, but there was always a barrier that seemed to not have an integration level that I was striving for. So I thought,
Mm-hmm.
well, if I want to make this happen, this is a way to do it, like to really embed
Yeah.
myself in an organization that's Windows based and figure out how to make this work.
Sure.
And when I say a bigger organization, I gave my example earlier of 2005. So this company, I'm at the time like 1.6, maybe 1.7 million, and
Mm-hmm.
they are maybe then 80 million. So
Right.
that's the size difference.
Yeah.
And through acquisition, they continue to grow and they're much larger than that today.
Sure.
So I ultimately decided there was something to learn. I wanted to see what it was like to be in a larger organization and to see if I could take this concept of what I was doing and, bring it to this organization. And I spent 2 years integrating my team and learning and then in 2020, so from 2020, well, it was the end of 2020. So 2021, 2022, spent time there and then took time off and was contemplating what to do next when I got a call from one of the vendors that I'd used for years. And they said, hey, would you be open to talking to our customers about your journey and how they can do what you did,
Right.
grow their Apple business. And so
Right.
that's where I am today.
With
And
Antiva, right?
Uh, I'm with a company called Adigy, which is a,
Right.
mobile device management company,
Sure.
and Intiva is a client of Adigy, and Forget Computers was a client of Adigy,
Okay.
and I talk to a lot of Windows teams that want to get better at Apple, whether they're
Yeah.
MSPs or internal IT teams,
Mm-hmm.
because the growth of Apple continues in business. And so that still
Sure.
excites me. I thought the growth of Apple would have happened 15 years ago, but
Uh-huh.
it's still happening,
Sure.
and it is exciting. And
Yeah.
I love the fact that I started out working with these really small designers, and and have worked with large corporations, and now essentially do business internationally
Mm-hmm.
with companies all over the world. It's just, I don't know if we talked about this previously, but I often say I always wanted to get into international business, and I
Mm-hmm.
love the fact that I have conversations around the world,
Great.
but I
Yeah.
never imagined I would do it all from my home
Yeah.
in my one chair, in looking at the same, desktop
Yeah.
that I always look at.
I love it. I love working from home.
Yeah.
I'm in the same
There
boat.
are lots of
So,
advantages, but
yeah.
you miss out on some of the fun
Sure.
aspects of travel.
Yeah.
And just last point about that, when we worked with creatives, especially downtown Chicago, we used to go into some of the coolest office spaces,
Yeah. It's true.
really well designed,
Yeah.
just fun to be in.
Oh, yeah.
And I think our culture is losing a little bit of that by
Yeah.
all of this work from home. I think there's a balance, and that's
Yeah.
maybe I know we need to wrap this up, but where we can end, all of this stuff comes down to a balance.
Yeah.
And finding that balance is the challenge.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you have to try things, and you have to keep searching for that balance, because I don't think anyone gets it right the first, second, or third time.
Yeah. If ever. Mhm.
Yeah, if ever.
If
It's
ever, right?
always, it's because it's
Yeah.
constantly changing, right?
Yeah.
The
Love it.
landscape
Yeah.
and the environment and the people and the
Right.
technology are constantly changing. So you have to rebalance.
And on that note, if there was an entrepreneur who came to you and says, "Hey, I want to start a business," if there was one thing that you can tell, what's one piece of advice that you can give to someone who is holding a corporate job or something like that and say, "I want to start a business"? What would you say to them?
Well, I certainly would encourage them. I mean, obviously you need to do your due diligence, as I said earlier, and not
Yeah.
just wake up one day and impulsively start a business. You need to plan and prepare.
Yeah.
But I think doing is the hard part, right? We
Yeah.
all talk about things, we all think about
Right.
things, we all dream about things, and
Yeah.
actually doing them is both the fun and the hard part.
Yes. Yeah.
But you just have to do it. And even I see this even within organizations where they talk about things and they don't do it.
Yeah.
So I call myself a recovering perfectionist.
Uh-huh.
So perfectionism will freeze you up and
Yes.
prevent you from doing things.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you can let that go and say, I just need to do it, and I will get better at it by doing it, then my advice is, if you want to do something, do it. And that's the only way you're ever going to have a chance of succeeding or making it better.
Wise words. So if someone wanted to get hold of you to talk about ABCXYZ, first of all, what are some of the things that's on your mind right now? Well, what are you reaching out to the community for? Well, what are the kinds of things that you want to engage in terms of conversation? And how do they get hold of you and get in touch with you?
Yeah, it's a great question. So LinkedIn is probably the best
Yeah.
because I have gotten off of checking email every day.
Yeah.
And one of the ways I did that, and I'm looking at this book here so I can make sure I say it correctly,
Yeah.
but I read this book.
Hold it up.
It's called A World
Yeah.
Without Email,
Yeah.
Reimagining Work in an Age of Communication Overload. And if you haven't read the book, I do recommend
Can
it.
you hold it up?
Oh, yeah.
Or
Yeah. Hold it up. Here it is.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll try to flip that if it's okay. Perfect. Great. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah. We'll put a link to that. Yeah.
And I read
In
the
our show
follow-up
notes.
book, which is Slow Productivity.
Oh,
I
I
don't know if
love it.
it's
I
I don't know if
love
it's
that
focusing
idea.
correctly, but slow
Yeah.
productivity. And that's
It's
also
flipped for
they're
me
both
right now, but we'll flip it back. Yep. Go ahead.
yeah,
Sorry.
they're both by Cal Newport. And it's funny, the first one I found in the bargain bin, so apparently nobody wanted to read it. But I found it, I
Yeah.
read it, and so my day, a lot of what I do is talk to businesses about how to grow with Apple technology, how to be
Yeah.
efficient, and share my story about working with businesses of all sizes.
Sure.
But
Right.
I also am really passionate about this idea that because of technology, it's allowed us to operate in what the author calls pseudo productivity, where we
Mm-hmm.
think we're getting things done, but
Yeah.
we're really not. And
Yeah.
so, and it makes total sense. We did not, this technology has not been around long enough for us to really master it. And
Yeah.
it's happening so quickly. Um, this idea that we should all just intuitively know how to deal with it
Yeah.
is kind of absurd.
Right.
So taking a step back and looking at the way business has changed and the way communication has changed and the tools have changed, how can we really be more efficient with our
Mm-hmm.
time and our productivity? And that goes back to something we said earlier about protecting your time and
Mm-hmm.
protecting the intake of information that's coming at you. And it's not just news, it's text from
Yeah.
friends and family and coworkers, and it's
Yeah.
instant messaging and it's email. And so, yeah, I'm thinking that if I were to start a business today doing something similar, although there would be a lot of continuity, there would also be a lot of differences in
Mm-hmm.
2024 compared to
Oh, 100%.
1998.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Thank you for sharing those. Way back when, but a few decades ago, I read a book. It was called this. It was similar to what you said. It was in a bin that I found. I think I found it at the library. I paid $1 for it.
Yeah.
Slowing down to the speed of life,
Oh,
and that
yeah.
that changed my entire view of work and productivity and all of that. And it kind of alludes to some of the things that you're talking about, kind of disconnecting and kind of getting to the core of who we are and prioritizing what we're all about and getting to know what our priorities are, what our values are, and then reaching out to the world from that perspective. So love that. And I'll put
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
I'll put the two books that you mentioned in our show notes. And in the end, I want to thank you for being on the podcast. I think you shared a ton of wisdom here, and I think they'll be very valuable to our listeners. So
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And I really enjoyed it. Thank you.